My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 41 years old, but for most of my family, the version of me that existed was nothing more than a disappointment. A girl lost in life, trapped in menial work, and invisible next to the shining stars that were my siblings. 3 years ago, they believed I was washing dishes at some greasy truck stop diner in Nebraska, a failed shadow of what they imagined their family should produce. They didn't know the truth. They couldn't know the truth. I remember that day as though it had been carved into my memory with sharp, deliberate strokes. The sunlight poured through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes floating in lazy spirals, the aroma of old coffee and stale bread mingling in the air. Victoria, my older sister, stood at the center of the room, her posture rigid, her perfectly manicured fingers pointed at me as if I were a crime scene. Her voice, honey smooth and precise, cut through the silence like glass. "Claire, look at yourself," she said, each word dripping with that cold, practiced mixture of pity and disdain. "Mom and Dad would be ashamed if they saw what you've become." I glanced at Daniel, my younger brother, who had always been the golden boy. Arms folded across his chest, taller than the doorframe in his designer suit, he nodded along, his expression a mixture of pride and judgment. His eyes, steady and sharp, pierced through me with the silent accusation of failure. "We tried helping after the military thing didn't work out," Daniel continued, voice calm and rehearsed. "But you can't help someone who refuses to be helped. The military thing." That was their sanitized, dismissive phrase for my 8 years in the Army as a military police officer, including 2 combat tours overseas, nights under fire, and a Bronze Star I had earned under circumstances most civilians couldn't imagine. To them, it was simply a failed chapter in my life, a cautionary tale of ambition gone wrong. I stood in silence, letting their words wash over me. I could feel the familiar pang of shame they wanted me to feel, but it no longer held power over me. Victoria's smile was thin, carefully measured, as if she were presenting a trophy of scorn, while Daniel's folded arms radiated superiority. Their combined presence was suffocating, yet I remained still, calm, and untouchable. Victoria was announcing her engagement that day, radiant beside Charles, a hedge fund manager whose very existence seemed to radiate wealth and entitlement. Daniel couldn't resist outshining even that, speaking proudly about his latest promotion at a prestigious law firm. And here I was, supposedly a failure, seated at the table of judgment under the harsh glare of familial scrutiny. "It's nothing personal," Victoria added quickly, eyes avoiding mine. "Charles's family, they're traditional. They wouldn't understand our background." A dishwasher sister, I thought bitterly. That was the background that disgusted them. That was the narrative they had constructed, one I would never live down unless I reshaped it myself. Daniel, ever the dutiful enabler, pulled out his checkbook like a magician producing a final card. "Here," he said, sliding a check toward me. $5,000. Clean yourself up. Take some classes if you want. But don't contact us until your life is in order." I stared at the check for a long moment. To them, it was a mere trifle, pocket change tossed to a failure. To me, it symbolized everything they thought I was worth, nearly nothing. I left it on the counter and walked out, my mind clear, my jaw set, my resolve solid. What they didn't know, what they could never have known, was that I hadn't washed dishes in 3 years. Every greasy apron, every fake paycheck, every shabby apartment I had shown them was part of a carefully constructed cover story. I was working deep undercover for the U.S. Marshal Service, leading an operation to dismantle a sprawling human trafficking network stretching from the Midwest to the Mexican border. 3 years, 18-hour days, earning the trust of the most dangerous criminals in the country. hiding in plain sight to save lives they would never know existed. Yet, in Victoria and Daniel's eyes, I was still the same dishwasher sister. Still inadequate, still invisible. The irony was not lost on me. While they climbed their respective ladders of status and success, I had been climbing my own, invisible, dangerous, and entirely indispensable. I was a Special Operations Deputy U.S. Marshal, one of only 47 women in the country's most elite fugitive hunting unit. My salary exceeded Daniel's first 5 years combined. My security clearance was beyond anything they could imagine. Yet none of that mattered, not until the operation concluded. The bus came on a Tuesday in March, 17 arrests across 4 states, 3 high-value fugitives who had evaded capture for years. 17 lives changed, dozens of others saved, years of careful planning and danger executed flawlessly. And that Friday, I received the call I had been waiting for. Marshal Donovan, pack your real clothes, you're going home. Home. The word felt foreign, weighted with everything I had endured, everything I had accomplished, and everything I had hidden. Victoria's wedding was on Saturday at the Riverside Country Club, the same location where Mom and Dad had celebrated their 25th anniversary. Daniel had texted the details months ago, perhaps forgetting he had uninvited me, or maybe intentionally twisting the knife. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to retreat, take my overdue leave, and vanish into anonymity, somewhere far from the world I had lived in for 3 years. But another part, the part that remembered being 12, standing in the shadows while Victoria won every accolade and Daniel basked in every accomplishment, wanted to see the look on their faces when they finally understood who I truly was. I drove straight from headquarters in my black Ford Explorer, the hum of the engine blending with the quiet Nebraska landscape. The sky was painted with the soft shades of evening, the air crisp and carrying the faint scent of spring. My hands gripped the wheel, not nervously, but with a steady anticipation. Tonight, they would see me. Arriving at the country club, the security guard barely glanced at me before stepping aside. The uniform I wore, my dress blues, adorned with the 5-pointed star of the U.S. Marshal Service, my rank insignia. My ribbon rack announced my presence in a way words never could. Every step I took was deliberate, a silent announcement of truth. The ceremony was in full swing. Victoria, radiant and white, stood next to Charles, the image of perfection and entitlement. Daniel, as best man, worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, exchanging names, exuding success. They didn't notice me, not yet. I took a seat in the back, observing. The whispers of Charles's relatives reached my ears, discussions of stocks, vacations, wealth. Then came the critical moment. I overheard Charles's mother speaking of me without realizing I was standing close enough to hear. Victoria's family is charming, she said, though I understand she has a sister struggling in some service job. It's very sad, really. Her words ignited a familiar heat in my chest, the same that had burned 3 years ago in that kitchen. But this time, I was no longer undercover. I stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Excuse me," I said, drawing all attention. "I believe you're speaking about me." The shock in their eyes was immediate. Victoria froze, Charles's jaw slackened, and Daniel's confident mask faltered. "I am Claire Donovan," I continued, holding my posture. "Deputy U.S. Marshal, Special Operations Group. I've spent the last 3 years working undercover to dismantle a human trafficking network. Last week, we arrested 17 suspects and rescued 43 victims, including 12 children." The room went silent. Faces went pale, jaws dropped, whispers stilled. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth, and Daniel's expression shifted from superiority to disbelief. I let them absorb it. I let the tension stretch, a living thing, before delivering the final blow of revelation. You may have thought I was failing, I said, voice steady, but I was serving my country in ways you could never have imagined. The bronze star on my chest, the medals and ribbons you now see, represent courage and sacrifice, not failure. Victoria's face contorted through disbelief, shame, and finally horror. Daniel's eyes darted around the room, as if searching for someone to explain this miracle. Charles's mother covered her mouth, unable to speak. Victoria's lips parted, but no words came out. Daniel, usually so confident, looked like a man unmoored from reality. Charles's mother, still pale, whispered to no one in particular, She's a federal marshal? Yes, I said, letting each word land. Like a controlled strike. Before that, I served 8 years in the Army Military Police, including 2 combat deployments in Afghanistan. I earned a Bronze Star for actions under fire. I've spent the last 3 years living a lie to protect the lives of those who couldn't protect themselves. The crowd of wedding guests, initially murmuring quietly among themselves, now stared. Some gasped. Others simply froze. My uniform gleamed under the reception lights, the ribbons and badges a testament to the story they'd never wanted to see. Victoria finally found her voice, trembling. Claire, I don't understand. You've been working at a diner? No, I interrupted gently but firmly. I haven't washed dishes in 3 years. The diner was my cover. Everything you believed about my life during that time was false. I was serving my country. I was risking my life. Her eyes flickered between disbelief, guilt, and shame. Daniel's shoulders slumped as if the weight of the past 3 years had landed squarely on him. You lied to us, Victoria whispered, almost a plea. No, I corrected her softly. I protected you from knowing the truth until it was safe to reveal it. I allowed you to underestimate me, yes, but that was part of the mission. I didn't deceive for selfish reasons. I deceived for purpose, for justice. The room was still silent, the weight of my revelation pressing down on everyone present. Charles stepped closer, protective instinct kicking in, but I raised a hand, signaling that I wasn't here to fight anyone, only to make them see. Claire, Victoria said finally, tears glistening, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. We judged you. I know, I said, my voice softening just slightly, and that's why I'm here tonight. Not to punish, but to show you the truth. That a person's worth is not defined by appearances, by jobs, by the superficial milestones you cling to. My worth was never in question, only your perception of it. Daniel stepped forward, eyes downcast. Claire, I need to apologize. What I said, the way I treated you, it was wrong. Yes, I said, steady and clear. It was. The reception hall, filled with music, laughter, and champagne glasses clinking, suddenly felt surreal, like a stage set for a lesson in humility and revelation. I let a quiet calm settle over me, observing every detail. Victoria's wedding, once a symbol of exclusion, had now become a stage for my truth. Victoria approached me, reaching out, her hands trembling. Claire, will you stay for the reception? For everyone to meet my sister, the federal marshal? I paused, looking into her eyes. The girl who had once worshipped her older sister and the undercover operative who had faced danger, fear, and moral complexity all came together in that moment. I'll stay, I said finally. For a while, the rest of the evening became a blur of introductions, apologies, and cautious respect. Victoria introduced me proudly. Everyone, this is my sister, Deputy U.S. Marshal Claire Donovan. Pride and guilt mingled in her voice, creating a sound I had never heard before. Guests asked questions about Afghanistan, about my missions, about the operation that led to 17 arrests and dozens of lives saved. Each answer I gave revealed a layer of complexity and courage they hadn't imagined. Even Charles, his father, a retired federal judge, nodded with genuine respect. The uncle who had mocked my supposed failure looked on in awe, finally understanding the magnitude of my life's work. Daniel stayed close, quietly absorbing the reality that his assumptions, his judgments, had been catastrophically wrong. "Is there any way we can start over?" he asked, hesitant, almost broken. I studied him, the brother who had once been my shadow and my rival. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm not the same person you knew 3 years ago. I've lived in a world that changed me. I don't need your approval anymore." "Not then, not now." "I understand," he said softly, "but I'd like to try if you'll let me." The night stretched on, a dance of reconciliation, recognition, and revelation. I moved among the guests, quietly observing the transformation in their perception. The family that had once judged me harshly now looked upon me with a mixture of awe, shame, and curiosity. I remembered the scared 12-year-old girl, the dishwasher sister, the one who had felt invisible and inadequate. She was gone. In her place stood someone forged by courage, perseverance, and integrity. Someone who had stared down criminals in the shadows and saved lives in ways no one would ever fully understand. By the end of the evening, Victoria approached me again, eyes glistening with tears. "Claire, I'm so sorry for everything. I want to understand. I want to be better. I want to be your sister, not just in name, but in spirit." "I know," I said, a quiet smile forming. And that's all I could ever ask. We walked out together under the soft glow of lanterns lining the pathway. The music and chatter from the reception faded behind us. I felt a sense of closure, not just with my family, but with the years of silent struggle, invisible victories, and battles fought alone. The best revenge, they say, is living well. But sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming who you were always meant to be. Showing up in the truth of yourself and letting the world and your family finally catch up. I drove home that night, still in uniform, the stars above Nebraska stretching endlessly. I thought about the path that had brought me here, the danger, the solitude, the courage. I thought about the lives saved and the people who would never know my name, and I felt peace. Because at the end of it all, I had lived not for approval, not for recognition, but for justice. Silent, invisible, unwavering, and finally fully seen. For the first time in years, they truly saw me.